Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
All right, time for the intro. Rich, do you want to cut me off, or are you going to let me just do the whole thing this time? So, all right, welcome to the Speak Nerd and Enter podcast. Here's the guys. You know that's Rich and Sean and Kelly. Nobody cares their names. Let's talk about.
It's true.
So apparently, over the last couple of days, the internet has blown up because there was a leak of the Wizards of the Coast open gaming license 1.1, I think, for the upcoming OneDnD, which everyone's been calling like 6th edition terms. And so like I've been watching all kinds of videos and everybody's freaking out about it. And so not to be left out, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So that's what we are going to talk about today. So should I get started, or who wants to jump in first with an opinion that I can shoot down?
First of all, I want to say that I don't know his name, the lawyer guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought his was reasonable. I thought his video was reasonable. I know what his stance is. He made that fairly clear towards the end of his video, but I thought his was, mostly just informational. But I will tell you my take on it is both sides are learning why companies have been doing what they've been doing for, years and years and ages. Losing control of an IP, there's a reason that copyright and has a lot of the laws written the way that they do, the rules written the way that they do, and not actively protecting your IP leads to loss of control of it and loss of ability to defend it and all of that. So most companies, most organizations are very protective of their properties, intellectual, physical, whatever it is. And I remember when I worked at NRA, and I'm sure any of you who've done this sort of thing, if you have, knows whenever you're going to use something that indicates association with, possession of, authority through, whatever it is, of whatever organization or company it is, they were, Johnny on the spot, no, you're not doing that, or you have to jump through so many hoops to get this done, that kind of thing. I remember when that knife was being made for you, Mark, that we were going to put the symbol on there, and that had to go through general counsel, that had to go through the secretary of the NRA and all that stuff. So many, just to have the emblem.
Yeah, and what Sean is referring to is I did some volunteer work teaching some classes, and they gave me a very nice, folding knife that had some engraving on the thing that was like, hey, thanks for your help and whatnot. So it was kind of like, a little gift that they gave to me, but it did have, I guess, the NRA logo on it and whatnot. And so it's very nice. I put it in a shadow box, got it hanging on the wall. But that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, and there was a lot to go through with that. Now the program,
which was, I'd also put it, that's not a commercial product. It's not for sale. It was a one time, like, we want to give somebody a gift.
Yeah,
that has our corporate logo on it, basically.
Yeah, someone who's done some stuff for us, and really put themselves out and done all this free stuff with asking for nothing, right? And we want to do something nice for them. Give them a letter, give them a knife, and all that stuff. I think we had I think it was those two things. And the hoops we had to go through to get that done, and all this was for somebody that the organization wanted to thank, right? And so it was a lot of work just to get that done. As far as the program, like the education and training program, I remember with that talking about instructors and how they were allowed to use the program and the materials of and all of that, and they were incredibly strict on has to be done this way and this way, can't be done this way, so many different rules.
And what Sean is referring to, for those of you who may not know us, is Sean used to work for the National Rifle Association in their education and training department, and I at the time was an NRA certified firearms instructor. And we're talking about, like, when you're teaching those classes, you have to follow their rules. Like, I can't go in and teach an NRA basic pistol class, but have stuff that's not in their curriculum that I just think is cool when I'm teaching, Mark's version of gunplay in an NRA basic pistol class. That is really what most of that is. Of what I think you're saying is, you got to keep everybody between the yellow lines and make sure you're only teaching the approved material and not going outside. And to tie that to what we're talking about here is the open gaming licenses. Here's what you can do. You got to stay inside these lines, right?
That was my point, is that very, very controlling on what could be out there, what was disseminated, what was done, all of that stuff. Anytime you were going to do something like that, had to get it approved, and couldn't take away from, couldn't contradict, all of that stuff. And the reason I thought of this was because they brought up the 30-day thing. Someone got outside the lines. It is industry standard. You send a notice, and after positive receipt of notice, because you send it registered mail, then they have 30 days from that point to respond. And all of it. It's not some nebulous, okay, well, we sent it on this day. You got 30 days to, respond from then. It doesn't work like that. But that's industry standard, man. And the control and protection of a program or an IP or a property, whatever it is, that's industry standard too. To me, what they did that was a mistake, and they're seeing the cost of it now, is opening it up. You open it up, that's the cost you're going to have. Now, if you're okay with that, if you're cool with that, and you want everybody to have a say in it and making stuff and all this wonderful creativity and all that, that's great. That's great. But the downside is you don't have that control anymore. You lose a good bit of that.
Exactly. And that decision was made 23 years ago. Right. When they came out with the third edition under an open gaming license.
Right. And so now what I'm
seeing, which I don't believe was a mistake, but from a corporate standpoint, I'm sure there's some people there who were going, ooh, I wish we had kept more control.
Right. The mistake I'm talking about is not doing it. The mistake I'm talking about is doing it and not meaning to do it. You understand what I mean?
Right.
You're not looking forward and seeing, oh, well, this is the reason we have this. And I know the whole story behind it, and, the guy who's, pushed for it and all that stuff. I get it. I'm, condensing all this because I don't see any point in going into hours and hours of who did what.
Right.
So they didn't have the foresight to see what was going to happen, or the people who, were in charge. Now with the stuff that's going on, they're thinking, wait a minute, we're losing all kinds of money on stuff that we could control, should control, need to control, because it's like Stallone selling his Rocky rights. Now they're making movies about Rocky, and he's got no say in it, and he's got nothing coming from it, nothing at all. And he's looking at this and seeing, well, that was mine.
Yeah, how much did those 3 Creed movies make? I'm not getting any of that, right?
Not getting any of that, no control, none of that stuff, right? So they are in the same boat. And what they're trying to do is now gain control of that boat back. They're trying to do that. And everybody who's been out there doing it is pissed off. Now, the problem they have, the mistake they made, was going into something that's owned by somebody else and thinking this is going to be their sandbox for, all time. I remember when the OGL first happened, and I was thinking, wow, okay, how long is this going to be around, right? And if you're doing something off somebody else's IP, I don't care how, ingenious you are and what great, adventure you came up with or whatever it is. If it's based off of somebody else's sandbox, if it's from their sandbox, that's the inspiration. It wasn't yours. You did it off of theirs, right? So if you want something that's yours, if you feel like you're being robbed, I feel strongly about this as an artist and, as just from a practical sense, make your own. Make your own, go out there and do that. If you really want to do something, go do that. Make your own thing.
But that also comes back to what you were talking about with the NRA classes, right? So if I advertise an NRA basic pistol class, which satisfies the Virginia concealed carry permit requirements, right? People go, oh, let me sign up for that, right? And they know that I'm teaching an NRA class. If I advertise Mark's awesome pistolero class, who's Mark? What are his credentials? That doesn't, you know what I mean? There's that. officialness and cachet of,
Well,
ooh,
there
I'm
is.
publishing under the you know, the Dungeons and Dragons OGL 3rd edition brand versus like how many vanity project role playing games are out there, you know,
but I mean,
oh, I made my own thing, but you've got a market slice which is measured in dozens of people, if, depending on how many friends you have, versus one that I go, if we're all on the 3rd edition rule set as a, you know, as an example, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of players who already understand the rules. Now you're focused on my cool setting and not recreating the wheel as far as a rule set goes.
Yeah, but the other person owns that wheel. You know, the other person made that wheel. So,
right.
so like
that's where they didn't, though, because 23 years ago they literally gave a perpetual worldwide royalty-free non-exclusive license to use this.
And I've already addressed.
I know, but everybody said, "Oh, okay, this license is perpetual," and
I get that.
It's not going to go away, so we are safe. Because you're right. If the 4 of us were like, we want to start a role-playing game company, and we're like, okay, we can come up with our own thing, and struggle to create our own player base around our new system, or we can use the world's most popular role-playing game, and here's an open license that says we have a perpetual royalty-free option to use it. Many companies have jumped on board with that and said, yeah, that's good. It's only 23 years later that Wizards / Hasbro is like, man, we want a piece of that. How can we do it?
Yeah, I know. Okay, but that's let me finish my point just real quick. I'm talking about the mistakes each side made, right? I'm not talking about the rightness of it or any of that. I'm talking about the foresight and mistakes that I see from the outside that each side made. So D&D, they made their mistake. I believe that those who were on the outside made the mistake in believing that
this company, so you think the original OGL was a mistake?
No. I think the company not foreseeing what it was going to be was the mistake. Okay. That's why I said, if you go into it and you're cool with the idea that other people are going to be doing this stuff and all that, which is contrary to I think everybody would agree, contrary to how business is generally run. Then fine. I got no problem with that. But you go into it with eyes open. If you don't, this is what happens. On the other side, the idea that, you know, in perpetuity, some companies can be cool with losing this money, that ain't going to happen either, you know, and the idea that you're going to be able to be in there and there's no problems, it's all going to be, you know, happiness and songs, and you're going to be able to be a millionaire off of somebody else's stuff or whatever you're going to do, right? That don't happen either.
No one's going to be a millionaire publishing.
You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. That ain't going to happen either. They're acting like it. They're acting like this is, you know, well, they're going to be able to take your adventure and publish it here and there and all this stuff and everything. If they didn't care about it that much, that wouldn't be an issue. That'd be like, all right, I don't care. You know, it's a cool story. Take it and do what you're going to do with it. But they don't. They're upset. They're pissed. Because this is why copyright law ended up being the way that it is because of this very situation. That's why, right? And now both sides are kind of living what it is. The downside I see is that this really puts a sour taste in the mouth of both sides for what could be a very good, artistically freeing situation. Now it's never going to be that way again. Never going to be that way again. All of the companies who would think about doing that are going to be hearing their lawyers say, now you see why. Now you see why you control it like Games Workshop does. You just crush them until there's no resistance, right? That's what I see from the outside, is that this ends up being what could have been a very unusual and nice story into, you know, in perpetuity is not. And you see this marriage, just like many marriages after 23 years, hey man, I'm not in love. I want, you know, one out. I want my stuff back, you know.
Right. That's what it feels like. That's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah. And the bitterness I see, especially from the side that's being left now,
right?
The bitterness I see.
Here's the thing, and we'll get into my point later. Is this is just a leak of a potential. The Wizards has not officially. It's a leak,
right?
They haven't officially said the thing, and personally, I think this is a trial balloon for them to see what they think
Yeah,
they
it
can
may
get
well
away
be.
with. And they put out like, we want all of this, knowing that there was going to be this kind of pushback.
Well,
test.
And
they can get away with whatever they can get away with in court. You know, I don't know if they're floating it to see what they can
no,
get
I
away
don't
with
think
so
it's.
much
I don't
as
think they
testing
intend it to
see-
go that far. I think this is really, which is weird because, like they tried this with 4th edition, the game
Yeah.
system license, which also had ridiculously onerous terms, and every publisher I know looked at it and was like, "Yeah, we're not going to do this." I mean, they had a handful of people take them up on it, and one of the terms was like, "Okay, let's say Mark comes up with an adventure, and I put it out under the 4th edition game system license, which was their version of like an OGL at the time." I couldn't write it. I couldn't take that same adventure and redo the rules for 3rd edition, or redo it for Savage Worlds, or redo it for another game system. It was forever locked inside the 4th edition thing. And of course, then they could come along and say, "Oh no, we don't approve of this, and you can't publish it anymore." So, like, you were essentially giving them complete control of your intellectual property when you published it under that license, and that kind of blew up in their face. So what's odd to me is seems like no lessons were learned, which I find difficult to believe. So I don't believe that Wizards of the Coast lawyers and Hasbro are this dumb, right? Which everyone's like, "Whoa, why would they do this?" Which is why I think this is more of a it's 2 things. It's a trial balloon, I think, to see what can we, if we put out this list of onerous terms that everybody freaks out and they go, "Oh, okay, we heard you people. Well, now the royalty is only 15%, and we're going to give you 40 days notice, or some, you know what I mean? If they start ratcheting back a little bit,
But
it's still terrible terms.
I don't know,
but it's not as terrible as what we're all upset about right now.
I don't know how much they're really going to lose. What are they losing by doing this? What really are they losing? That's what I don't get.
Well, let's start with the value that third-party publishers bring to the table, right? The reason they opened this up was not just out of the goodness of their hearts. They wanted to sell rule books. What they didn't want to do was write modules and do monsters and do all of these other little things that are not necessarily as profitable for them. They're like, "We want to sell rule books," and they did. They sold a bunch of rule books, and they had other publishers who were able to come in and kind of fill the content need, that area of the market, and this whole little industry kind of popped up with third-party publishers who were publishing all kinds of things. There were, what is it? The Complete Guide to, Bards and Rangers. I forget the name of the company that had those for 3rd edition. They did a whole line of books. Mongoose Publishing, I think, really got started publishing those. So there's some bigger names that came from this, and there's lots of content that has come out that wouldn't exist if they kept it all in-house and they did this. Do you think we'd have so much available on Drive-Thru RPG or was it DM's Guild now without the open gaming license?
So I don't know, man.
What that does, that grows their player base, right? Because we all know how to play D&D, right? 5th edition, 3rd edition, whatever edition we're playing, we all know how to play it. And so if we come out with a new setting, or it's time to start a new campaign, you're like, okay, do we want to go learn Mutants and Masterminds or Dark Heresy or some new system that none of us are familiar with, or we're going to stick with what we know? Because you can put D&D on like a comfortable pair of jeans. So sticking with that rules framework, which are not copyrightable content in the first place.
Yeah,
there's a benefit to them because everybody needs a player's handbook, and the complete player's handbook is not available in open content. You do have to have the rule books to use all the other stuff.
Okay, let me I feel like I'm in the Supreme Court where I've actually been taking notes because you two have been riffing off each other so hard. I had to take notes to make sure I can get back to all the points that you made, and they were great.
All right, let's hear from the wise Latina.
Yeah, the wise Latina. Yes. The elder statesman. So the first one is a point that both of you guys made. What they're trying to do here.
Congratulations, Mark.
From what I can see, yes. But it's something you both touched on. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Back in 2000, the market conditions were much different than they are today in 2023. Secondly, the people in charge in 2000, the people that you're talking about, the lawyers, the businessmen, and even the artists, they're not the same people as they were, or some of them are, but very few, have lasted 23 years. So you've got a difference of market conditions. So the deals that they made, like Sean was saying back then, and like even Mark was saying, you asked the question, was it a bad deal? Back then, it was a great deal because if you remember back in 2000, the RPG industry was in trouble. it was going down fast. Video games were eating its lunch, and even companies like Games Workshop, which were still strong, they were still a minority compared to things like Warcraft and all those other things that were just eating up the gaming market, Xbox, PlayStation, video games, all that stuff. So back then, the open gaming license that generated some much needed funding that they needed just to keep afloat. And that was, I think, right around the time that TSR went out of business, wasn't it, Mark? The time that TSR actually went bankrupt.
I think it was a little bit before that, but I think that third edition and the original OGL was prior to the Hasbro buying Wizards of the Coast, correct? So this was a Wizards of the Coast alone made that decision to publish under the open game license.
And this gets back to Sean's point, because Sean, as an artist, makes the point, the artist versus the business, the suits versus the pencils, right? So, you got guys of an artistic bent, and they want to create and they want to do all this stuff. And then you've got those cutthroat, sharp businessmen that their entire job is to drive that profit margin for investors. And
every time.
but I mean, Hasbro is it's the big fish in the pond, right? It's a huge money making machine, but for every success they have, they probably have 5 losses, and all those losses cost them money. So they're going to monetize each success harder and harder and harder, and they're going to look for the most ruthless, the most bloodthirsty, the most money grubbing people that they can possibly find to make sure that they keep that train rolling on and on. Right. Because when they try to do it, loss versus success is probably like, I mean, or loss success is probably like this. But they try to make those successes so overwhelming that it just cancels out the losses. But they can't do that indefinitely. You can't always have a hit look at Star Wars. Look at
Pixar.
Yeah, look at Pixar. Yeah. So, they can't have that. So I just wanted to touch on those things, because I agree with both of you in different respects. I think but as far as the beauty of meeting in the middle and having a great opportunity, I've never seen it happen.
I've never seen it happen either.
The closest to that happening, in my opinion, was 23 years ago when they published the 3rd edition of D&D and gave it an open game license.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was them going, here's the new version of the game, please buy it. And we're all like, yeah, we want to buy it. But they're like, here's an opportunity for all of these, artists and pencil and storytellers to jump in here and do a little thing and create content and publish and push it out. And literally it created the PDF market, right? The third-party publisher market would not exist without the open gaming license. And it's made some money. I granted. So like that to me is this happy medium. We all bought their books. It's the most popular role-playing game in the world. It's a beloved property, and I get to play in that sandbox and come out with cool stuff. Then along comes 4th edition, and they shoot themselves in the foot with an onerous license that everybody was like, nah, we're good. So in 5th edition, they tweaked the OGL a little bit. It's version 1.1, and everybody seems happy with it, right? So you can, and I don't publish anything under 5th edition. Everything I published was back under 3rd edition. But it's a thriving marketplace. They even have made this kind of deal with One Bookshelf and have DM's Guild, which is kind of this PDF marketplace for 5th edition specific things. So like they've encouraged this and allowed it and made license deals and they have done a lot to they haven't fought against it, I guess is what I'm going to say. Like they haven't spent 23 years fighting this, right? If anything, I think the case can be made that they've spent a lot of time encouraging this through putting out the license, not suing people over the ensuing 23 years.
This would
and now it's like, oh, that cake tastes good. I want to have that and eat it. And somebody at Hasbro is like, how do I get this money?
That's two of the things I was going to touch on. Is first, just like we were using the analogy for the marriage, you can see that over time one of them ain't happy. One of them's getting more and more unhappy, right? And usually it's the business side. It's the business side because they see, oh, well, this was exactly what we were looking for, success. Great. Where's ours? Right? And that doesn't, the emotional side of that becomes the logical side of it for them. And then, to the detriment of both parties, whichever side is doing it, right? So you have that positive thing, but perception is reality. And so the perception that the stockholders have and the board of directors has and all of the people, regardless of whether they're the same ones who were there at that time, or all that really matters is who's there now, right? And if they're unhappy with it, they're going to try to change it. They're going to try to trade up.
I understand that,
girl, right?
And legally, go ahead.
Now, this was the thing. This was the thing I was going to get into. The other part of it, though, is that the reason that copyright law is written the way that it is because you have to protect it. So to show that you're trying to protect your IP. If you don't do that, then, as I've been told by general counsel numerous times, you can't defend it anymore. It's no longer yours. Right. So I wonder, to get past all of the stuff that I was talking about before, to get to the bottom line there, I honestly don't know if they're going to be able to protect themselves from people being able to do this, other than the idea that, well, we're going to be able to fight in court more than you are because we got deeper pockets.
Yeah,
but I believe that might be the reason that they're doing the test balloon, is to see who actually is going to be willing to pony up and fight them on it and try to fight back. And how expensive is it going to be?
But here's the thing,
because you got Paizo and the other companies,
right? And Paizo's big. There's a couple of big companies out there, and there's also a bazillion of us.
And Hasbro big.
That's the thing. That's
right.
The thing.
But that's just it. We don't have to be. Right? We have the 3rd edition. We have the 5th edition. We can just all decide not to play OneDnD.
Well,
if they're going to be, if they're going to be jerks about this and piss off all the player base, like there's so many role-playing games out there that we can all go play. Paizo, I'm sure, would be perfectly willing to go, okay, come play us. We've got an open license. So it's not like, I think they're being unnecessarily combative with this, and I can't believe that it's a mistake. So I think this is a trial balloon to either see what we'll put up with, right? Or it's a Games Workshop-ish tactic of, we want to just scorched earth and blow out all of the third-party publishers, and we're big enough to still be standing when this is done.
See,
but neither of them, I think, are good for Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast or the D&D brand. That's the thing. Like, if you don't have the goodwill of your player base, and there are so many options to go elsewhere, and rules are not copyrightable in the first place.
Yeah.
So you can own the Mind Flayer, and you can own the Displacer Beast or whatever. But you know what? I can have a Brain Eater, and I can have a Teleport Dog, or there's plenty of generic things to work around the rules. Or here's an idea. We could just go play something that is not Tolkien-esque fantasy, right? And do role-playing games. So, there's no monopoly that Wizards of the Coast has on the role-playing and the tropes. They don't own elves. They don't own dwarves. They don't own all of these things. So it just strikes to me that somebody's making a really, really bad call, because here's the thing. I am sympathetic to Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro. 23 years ago, they released the OGL, and it creates this, unforeseen market, because I don't know that anybody who released it foresaw. And to be fair, under 3rd edition, there was a ridiculous amount of content, and a lot of it was not good.
Yeah.
And some of it was controversial. There was the Book of Erotic Fantasy and some other things that came out, right, where everybody's doing it. It was an open sandbox that people could go play in. And you expect these kind of things, or if you don't, you're dumb. But so, like, I understand the Hasbro side going, we're going to do a new edition of the game, and if it's wide open Wild West like 3rd edition was, that's going to be a problem, right? So I get the want to control a little bit, but if you're Hasbro, if I'm Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, and I'm going to do 5th edition, okay, I want the virtual tabletop piece, because we think that's going to be big. That's not covered under the OGL anyway, right? So you don't need this new open system license to play in that sandbox, right? Like, you guys can do that, and you're the one that's going to license all the content to the existing VTTs. So I'm setting that aside. This is really more of, man, you have to use this license, which is legally dubious at best, given the term set up in the OGL that specifically is meant to prevent companies from doing this. Right? I mean, that phrase is legitimately meant to say we can't change this license in an onerous way. You can just go use the old one, and I think they know it. So I can't wrap my brain around why somebody would do this unless it's a trial balloon or scorched earth, where we just want to, we want to blow all these guys out and make it legally treacherous for companies, because most of these people are like, it's a couple 3 guys working at their computer part-time doing, I want to come up with some cool D&D stuff. Well, I'm not going to risk my house and my life savings to go to battle with Hasbro,
See,
but
I
there's
think
some
a lot
companies
of
that will, and it only takes one.
I think I know why they're doing it. I think I know why they're doing it. What's coming in 2023 that is D&D centric, but is not connected to role-playing games? What's the
Spanx for gamers?
The movie.
That terrible movie. Hold on. The terrible movie. I'm going to make my prediction on this movie right now. Good movies come out in Christmas or summer. You know what comes out in March? the not so good movies. So I have high hopes, but I don't think this is going to be a great
and
movie.
They don't have a good track record.
Let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know they don't have a good track record. I got the crappy DVDs on my shelf.
Poor Jeremy Irons.
Yes, Jeremy Irons. He acted his heart out. For that part. No, but this movie right now is receiving, I'd say, more than lukewarm. Like, it doesn't look like
every time.
Okay. Yeah, but there's okay. So what I think they're banking is they're gonna, even if the movie is so to people like us, there's going to be a whole audience that's going to be introduced to them. They're going to go and they're going to say, oh, D&D, I know what that is now. Someone who never knew what it was before. I think they're just trying to get their ducks in a row so they can monopolize whatever they can squeeze out of it from that push from the movie, because they've been in such a
and I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but where are people going to buy this D&D book? Right, most of the bookstores are closed. There's not that many, so they're going to go to their friendly. Let me finish. They're going to go to their friendly local game store, and if they pissed off all of the gamers with onerous, people are going to be like, "Hey, I want the new edition of D&D," and they're going to get an earful from the people that should be selling the book, who are going to say, "You know what, Pathfinder's better," or "You know what, you should try this one."
Or they're going to say, "You don't need the book. Just go online and get this program. It's all there for you. You never need to pick up a book. You don't have to clutter up your home. We've got it all there for you on virtual tabletop. Just pay us $29.99 a month, and you can have the whole D&D
No one's going to pay $29.99 a month.
Whatever, but
But see, here's the thing, though. Like, if they let's say you're right, and they do that, and they come out, and it's like Netflix cost. You get access to all the books, and a bunch of the books, or whatever it is, different tiers. I'm a DM, so I need more. Like, you make that deal, I'm down. I don't want to have to flip through books. I want my modules all laid out in the VTT. I think we talked about this on the last one, where I'm like, I have purchased a module in Roll20 just so I had everything in Roll20 without me having to put it there.
I remember.
Like, that's, there's a benefit there, and I still think if Hasbro Wizards of the Coast does a good job, I'd switch over. I'll use Roll20 forever, and I like it. We just started using the Forge, and that's fine. It's cool. I haven't used all of the features because there's a bit of a learning curve to it, but they're both great. But from what I've seen of the new one, like I say, I'm not married to any one of these, and if they can give me a better product at a reasonable price, I'm down, and that's where they can make a ton of money. Like, Kelly, you know what I'm saying? I'm not anti-Hasbro, and I'm not anti-capitalism, but there's a difference between, hey, man, here's a better product, and we're competing with these other virtual tabletops.
You're a Mattel communist.
I'm a Mattel shill. You're on to me. I'm here for big gaming.
Hasbro capitalists versus Mattel communists.
Hey man, you've suffered us for long enough. Lay the beat down, K-Man. That's right. What's the story?
Hey, at least I'm not with those fascists, right?
Hey man, what's up?
Yeah. No, look, I don't know. On this whole thing, I don't know that I'm necessarily sympathetic to either side. I mean, I get the points being made. I think Sean said it very brilliantly in the beginning. Both sides peed in the pool. and now they're trying to take
I don't
the
think he
pee out of the
said
swimming
that.
pool. And
I did notice my knowing nod.
I mean, both parties peed in the pool. They're trying to take the pee out of the swimming pool, and they're finding out that they can't. I think there is an overemphasis on the use of the word perpetual in the OGL. I don't think it means what everybody think it means. I don't think, because it's not spelled out in specificity within the contract, and that's the thing that's going to hang you up in the courts. Is when you go argue this in the courts, they're going to say, well, what does the contract state? And the word perpetual doesn't have any other additional qualifiers to say perpetual what? Perpetual to the time? Perpetual to every other thing that we release and come out with? I mean,
No, it
that's
literally says grant. It literally says grant you a perpetual, worldwide, royalty-free, non-exclusive license.
right. But
What's the definition of
perpetual to what?
Yeah,
Perpetual to what? I mean, if I give you a perpetual
means
license
it doesn't
to what
end. There's no
I know what the
expiration
word
date on it.
perpetual means. What I'm
Well, you
saying
just
is
said you think that we don't know what the word perpetual
Right,
means,
I
and
think
that it
you're
means
missing-
something
I-
different.
No,
I
I
for
think
you.
it'll be argued what it
No,
means.
I get
I think
it.
it'll be argued.
look,
I get
I
his
think
point.
that you're
There's a
assigning the
difference
word
between the
perpetual
and
more
legal.
meaning than it has in the scope of that contract.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that comes into play. Did they state a perpetual license to everything we develop from here on out to the end of time? No, they said perpetual. And somebody could look at that in a very narrow scope and say perpetual to the time frame that came out. And you have
A
no
lawyer
other
will.
license. You have no other license to anything that happens beyond that point. I think there are people, as Sean pointed out, there are people who went into a business arrangement misunderstanding the scope of what could happen next. Is Hasbro, is Wizards of the Coast sending out a trial balloon? Probably, but I'll tell you this from being in rooms with lawyers for most of my professional career, those lawyers had a good idea what was going to happen with that trial balloon.
Oh yeah.
They were going to see what happened next, but they knew what the most probable outcomes
Right.
were for them. So it's a trial-esque sort of thing. They could walk it back a little bit, say, okay, instead
Right, but
of
the damage is done. You know what I mean? Like, even if they walk it back and we end up with the same license we have under 5th edition, right, which nobody really is complaining about.
But
They've already done damage by releasing this, which is why I think it's a tone deaf trial balloon leak, or it's the opening salvo in a we want to blow up we want to make publishing for OneDnD.
Well, bear in mind, I would say
dangerous for people without deep pockets.
Bear in mind, I would add on to Kelly's point with that, in having dealt with general counsel quite a bit, and then of course the executive side, right? The two of them are not in lockstep. The two of them are not.
No.
Executive wants to know, what are you going to be able to do for me, right? And the legal side is all about the law. This is what it is. They don't care about public opinion. They don't care about anything else. They care about, this is the law. This is what the law says.
Right.
This is how it could be interpreted and all of that. So the scorched earth thing, that's probably the legal side. The one where you're talking about how's it going to be received, that would be more on the executive side. And then the two of them are going to bandy about what they want to do with it. But to think that the company is going to be one monolithic idea behind the, the walls, that would be a mistake too. So it really depends on who's got the power there too, at least in my experience. Maybe it's been different for you guys, but from what I've seen, that's how that goes. I've heard the conversations, with the lawyers and stuff, and it's all about, this is what the law says, this is what you got to do, and the other side is, well, we got to think about, and that kind of thing. And the lawyers
but in that commercial law area, I've known too many lawyers who will say, okay, well, here's what the law states. But what the law states is really sort of a nebulous construct. That's why the courts exist. So we're going to make an interpretation of what we can do. They're going to look at it from different angles. You're going to have people on the side who feels offended by this new license statement, and they're going to be looking at it from one point of view. You're going to have the corporate lawyers looking at it from another. And again, that's why the courts exist. Hasbro, Wizard of the Coast, is not going to lose in court. They have deeper pockets. They're going to bury you under paperwork. If they do lose, it won't be for many years down the road. And by that point, it'll be 15th edition.
Well, not only that, and you also have different jurisdictions, so that you have the different jurisdictions which are going to be fighting, and then that has to go to the federal side, and then all the way up to however high somebody's going to take it. So yeah, you're right. The amount of effort and money just time consumed in fighting this sort of thing. I mean, I don't know many who have that wherewithal.
No, I don't. And I think look, at the end of the day, people are going to keep playing D&D.
Yeah.
I don't care what
Well,
happens
that's
to
the
the game.
question. Are they going to keep playing the newest edition of D&D if they
Why
go
would you-
through and start suing everybody?
Why
Or
would you
are
want
we
to?
just going to go stick with our 5th edition stuff or 3rd edition stuff that we're fine with?
Because it's
You
the
stick
new
with what
hot
you want to
thing.
play. But
Yeah.
here's the question. And I was critical in an email about this to you guys. I think, and I'll say it exactly as I said in the email. I think there's a lot of people who were on some sort of Candyland adventure on a Care Bear train of wonder, thinking that we've got this opportunity to make lots of money on the back of this company, and we've got this perpetual thing. In business, no, you don't. I think everybody's now come to a very harsh lesson of what actual capitalism is in the modern day. Things change for you, and I'm sorry that things change for you, and I'm sorry that a lot of people are super pissed that they can't go out and publish their thing under this new license agreement and continue to ride a gravy train with biscuit wheels. But
Welcome
that's
to
also
reality.
One of the best quotes, by the way, ever. That was an amazing movie. Well done, Kelly.
thanks. But it's one of those things. So I think at the end of the day, I'm kind of with Sean. Both sides have parts to play in the realities that everybody's dealing with now. I do think that Hasbro is put pressure on Wizards of the Coast because I think role-playing games picked up a bit during the pandemic. And all the other game systems we've seen out there, even in video games, the microtransaction has become this grandiose thing, just this river of money running into it. So I think Hasbro's being a bit greedy. I'll give you that one. But what company hasn't been? And
Yeah.
that's what we expect at
No
the end of
such
the day.
thing. There's no
And-
such thing in business being
Right.
greedy.
I mean, and as I heard from somebody long ago, vote with your wallet, man. If this is not what you want, the D&D, while being, the progenitor of many role-playing games, is not the only one on the market. You
Yeah.
want to play something?
And that's
go
the
for it.
part I have a hard time. Like, if this was 100%, locked up IP, they controlled everything. Cool, it's a different story. But you literally cannot copyright rule mechanics.
Right.
Tunnels and trolls.
Right?
It's
So
your
we're already talking about a thing that they don't have 100% locked in control
Right.
of. Plus, 23 years ago, they put out the original open gaming license, which put all of this stuff out there, right? Like,
they invented
you can't stuff all that toothpaste back in the tube. It's out there.
Mark, what I was
So the
thinking about
market
as
is
I was
so
going
different.
through.
Yeah,
What I was thinking about as I was, listening to some of those videos and all that stuff, right? I was thinking, man,
Suffering.
the same thing Kelly was just talking about. You don't like to go play something else, right? I was thinking about that game that we did where we didn't even have rules. You were just sitting there deciding behind the screen, doing whatever the hell you were doing, flipping
That's
a
the best
coin
game
or
I've ever
whatever,
played.
whether it worked
Seriously.
or not, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, you know what? That was just as good, if not better. And it was all based on story and all of that. Not to say that other scenarios have been great and all of that stuff. But what else do you need? You can play any game you want. It's really a thought process.
Yeah.
And
That's work.
how do you want the story to go? Be creative. Go out there and make your story, do your thing. You don't need anybody's stuff with that,
Right.
That's work. I just feed it to me. Just pour it in. Pour it in.
Yeah,
But
and,
it's more
and that's
work.
what I mean. Like, any rule system will do.
Yeah.
in my mouth.
Or
And-
not
and
even
so-
a rule system.
Exactly. But that's my point. It's like, I don't understand the thought process behind, Wizards. Now, I get it. Lawyers are like, we want to control everything, and that's my job. I'm going to do this. But if you're the CEO of Wizards of the Coast, you got to understand that the goodwill of your player base is not worth zero. You know what I'm saying? And so how many people do you want to upset with your trial balloon, let alone if they actually release this as, nope, this is going to be the license, right? Because there are so many other options and so many other places that we can go, and all the big guys can, that are not Wizards of the Coast, could literally put their heads together and go, okay, let's come up with the new generic role-playing game system, hello GURPS, or some other version that we as a collective community decide, we're going to use this as our rule framework
See,
for
I was
all of the other
wondering.
settings.
See, I was
Magic
wondering
the
that.
Gathering
I was
seems to have
wondering
proven
that. I
that
was
theory
like,
wrong.
why doesn't the gaming community come up with some, like you said, just some generic system? Put it, because like you said,
Well, we haven't had
they
to
don't
for
own the
23
mechanics.
years because of the open game system.
I get it. But I mean, why not
I did,
just, instead of the panic from
yeah.
everybody about what's going on, why not have this movement where instead of, oh, they suck, we're going, getting our pitchforks and all this
Well,
stuff, why not come out and say, you know
yeah.
what, that's all right, don't even need it. We don't, we can go ahead and use, dice systems and whatever we
Yeah.
want
Well,
to
the
make up on
panic
our own.
itself is 4 days old at this point, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like the panic is only right now. Most of the videos
Fortnite.
are rage clicks.
Yeah.
You know, let me go make videos on YouTube about the sky is falling and this is the end of the world. The sky is not falling and this is not the end of the world because I have first edition D&D books, I have second edition D&D books, I got third and fourth edition D&D books, I got fifth edition books. You know, like I got literally have, what is it, Savage Worlds and GURPS and all of these other systems. Was that Kelly?
But you also said that you made this point earlier. There's a leak. It's a leak. We've seen nothing official yet. So I mean, the sky isn't even following because you don't even have anything other than this probability. You don't even know what the actual outcome is yet. But you're right. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah, so I am not one to go, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And let's be a little sympathetic to Hasbro. Hasbro buys Wizards of the Coast, and they're like, what? You gave away your most valuable intellectual property 23 years ago? What the were you thinking? Right? So I'm sure somebody at Hasbro was like, what? Why did you do that?
My question,
and again, at the end of the day, I think that was a good idea, and I think it was a good move, and it grew the role-playing game industry. So I don't think the open game system was a bad idea, and I think it did some really good things, with the understanding that I have actually published material and made thousands of dollars from stuff that I have published. I've directly benefited from this, but I also feel it's benefited, despite my bias. Yeah, I make a couple $100 a month from stuff I published, 15, 20 years ago. Yay me. But to me, it's like part-time job money, $100 a month, $200 a month. Like, okay, I can go buy myself something nice. I'm not making a living off of that. And I always considered it kind of this part-time, playing in the kiddie pool, kind of, a safe place for me to go, do some creative stuff. And it was fun and I enjoyed it, but I looked at it and was like, okay, well, this isn't going to get me where I want to go financially in life. And so I've moved on and done other things. When they announced 5th edition, I legitimately was like, oh, maybe I'll get back into that and do some more publishing or whatever. And, but this is one of those factors that is like, well, if they're going to have an onerous license, nah, but going back to, who was it, 23 years ago, the landscape was so different, right?
Yeah.
The landscape now, it's so easy to connect to your audience with social media. How did you reach 100,000 people back in the year 2000? Well, nowadays you could do that on Twitter now. You could do that on YouTube now. You could do that on TikTok now. You could do that on Facebook, or putting up your website. All those things have gotten infinitely easier. So I think it will be easier, if Green Ronin and Paizo and a couple other the larger companies all got together and said, hey guys, we don't like what's going on over here, but we love role-playing games. We're going to come out with a truly free, open source, perpetual, irrevocable licensed system that anybody can use. Man, we're off to the races, and the barrier to entry to do something like that, whether it's a conglomeration of companies or one creative designer, is much smaller than it was 23 years ago. So I get Hasbro. Do they want to make some money on the virtual tabletops? Cool. Give me a good product. I'll buy it. Are they going to sell books and now they cost $60 per hardcover instead of $50 per hardcover? Okay, whatever. Inflation, everything's gone up. I'm still going to buy your player's handbook. Unless you're jerks for the next 6 months or however long it takes until they decide to actually publish it, then that I think a lot of people are going to be, if you're coming into this cold, you're like, oh, I've heard of D&D. I think I'll get into it. You don't have an opinion because you don't have the history. You don't have the, you're just like, oh, I'm going to get the new version because that's the only one I'm even aware of. So we're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who have been gaming for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, right? Those are your dungeon masters. Those are the ones who are already spending most of the money. How much do you want to upset them if your trial balloon turns out to be more than just a trial balloon. So I don't see an upside here for Hasbro, and if anything, I think they've already done some damage reputationally.
But will they survive that damage? Absolutely.
It's Hasbro. Of course they're going to survive.
Right? Absolutely.
Right, but in the grand scheme of things,
because Hasbro's
D&D is
making
not
money
that,
hand
it's
over
not that
fist.
big of a brand, though. Like, D&D is not a big
I
brand
know.
compared to some other things.
I know.
Yeah,
It's not.
I once heard
Amazon
somebody say,
exists
like,
just because
one...
Hasbro hasn't flexed their muscle yet.
Yeah,
That's-
one Hollywood movie has, like, a bigger budget than most of the whole gaming industry. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
let's put this in perspective. This is not
Right.
Avatar money we're talking about.
Right. That's You're exactly
Avatar
right.
money isn't even Avatar money though. At this point, you don't know what's real and what's true and what's false. What's just
No,
smoke.
it's all true. Avatar is
against-
the best movie in the world because it made so much money. That's what makes it the best.
I agree.
But I think you guys have all kind of wrapped
Been
your
right.
heads around it.
Thank you.
Been right, correct? Yes.
Going nod, yeah.
And oddly
yeah.
enough, even Kelly was right this time, I think.
Sweet.
I think we all need to do a knowing nod.
What are you going to say, Rich?
I think we're all coming at this from slightly different angles, all agreeing in the same place.
That's so gross.
I'm coming at it. Well, I'm coming at it from a perspective of somebody who's been
Somebody's been what? Keep going.
working on it. Waiting for the knowing nods to stop over there out of Giggle Puss. I come at it from the perspective of a longtime role-playing gamer, but not a creator of basic D&D modules and stuff for my own people, but not someone like Mark who's actually written stuff and published stuff and actually made somewhat of an income off of it. I'm also coming at good job, Kelly. Sean's coming at it from the perspective of an artist, and Kelly's coming at it from the perspective of a jerk. Who's negative about everything. But
knowing nod.
At the end of the day, knowing nod. Yes, but at the end of the day, I think we all want it to do well, right? I mean, we all want D&D to be good, to like provide something for us. I mean, I don't necessarily like Hasbro. I'm neither here nor there on.
Hey man, I played my
Hasbro
share of
does well.
Palladium. It doesn't have to be good.
Yeah, but I mean, Hasbro. I mean, it's not just like if Hasbro can't make D&D work, they're gonna sell it to somebody, and maybe they'll make it good. D&D will remain. It ain't gonna. It's not just tied to Hasbro. So there's this fanboyishness to like, oh, Hasbro has to do this or it has to be that. They don't. If it doesn't get successful, they'll sell it like any other piece of property they have. It's like, oh, get rid of it. We want the business. We don't care about the product. The product is just business. So and that's. But we don't feel about it that way. To us, it means something. To them, it's something they bought. It's like five guys in a room smoking cigars. Like, let's spend $30 million to buy this thing, and we'll make $58 billion. I mean, that's all they think about it. As far as what it means to them, it doesn't mean anything. It's only a source of revenue. And for us, it's a lot different. It's something from our childhood. It's something we've grown up with. It's something we've shared with each other. It's something
suits versus pencils, like you were saying.
Yeah, suits versus pencils. But that's even in the business side, like the creative side of it. Even that's combined to the business. The actual end user, the end user has a connection to it that's deeper than even the guy that's drawing the pictures or writing the rules. Because we're the ones that actually utilize what they make for us to have this social interaction. Because what's a game? A game's an interaction between two people to have fun, right? And
why do so many of ours end up in arguments?
Or to make enemies in the case of grand tournaments for Games Workshop.
You got to stop talking in innuendo.
Going not. But you see what I'm saying? For us, it means
kind
something.
Of game sessions you've been having.
But and they're all with you guys. But at the same time, God. But like I said, for us, it means something much more than just a source of revenue or a source of income to feed our family. It's something that we share with each other to have a good time and to get, to have an interaction. And that's something that's never going to be cared about by those people, because it's just not, even if they're a gamer, like the guys that first made D&D, they were
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's none of
And
that
the
is
fact
left.
that you froze
Gone.
there with that face was amazing.
I didn't.
You know,
am I wrong or am I right?
No, but the thing that and this will be my last point. The thing that I feel about it is a long time ago, I was awakened to the reality that I don't need any of the companies to be able to do the stuff that we do. We don't need them. We've each of us have had various campaigns and stuff that we've written and done that have been just amazing, and all of that. Had a great time with fritzing with rules, whether we had them, whether we didn't, making our own stuff, and all that. So many different parts or aspects of these games. Hell, we can even make our own miniatures, right? So I was awakened to the reality a long time ago that it's really convenience, as long as it's convenient. And as soon as it's not convenient anymore, well, I really don't need you. So I don't feel, maybe that's why I don't feel uber threatened or uber motivated over the whole thing, is because it doesn't feel like it should have the impact that it seems to be having.
It's like a
But
salad bar. You take what works and leave the rest.
Well, people are
yes,
monetizing
another
the
great
outrage
quote, Kelly. Yes, another great
People are
one
monetizing the outrage for clicks.
from another
They're doing-
amazing movie.
But again, as coming to this as someone who has been a publisher, right? And so I enjoyed that very much. I enjoyed the creativity, and this is another concern that I have that I haven't heard anybody else bring up. Right, under the new license terms, Wizards of the Coast basically has the sole discretion to tell you, "Oh, I don't like that. You can't publish that." And so now we're talking about some free speech things, right?
Sure.
And so as a publisher, Scorched Earth Studios, I hired a freelance artist or freelance guy to write things for me named Chris Field, who started his own game line and was doing stuff, but he published under me, right? And so he didn't want to go through the hassle of like starting his own account and publishing and whatnot. So he'd give me stuff and I'd either lay it out for him and publish it and we'd split some royalties, or he finally got to the point where he was just doing stuff, but it was under my company, Scorched Earth Studios. And personally, I think this kid is a genius. Like he's coming. Most people are publishing, bullshit with like, oh, I have elves, but they're blue, or I have dwarves, but they live in the sky, or it's all some weird derivative thing of fantasy. And he's literally got like a sci-fi cyberpunk setting set like in a post-abortion war setting. It's like abortion was this big thing, and there was lifers and choicers, and they're having this big fight, and like. It's bonkers sci-fi that is not like anything that I've ever seen, and it may not be anybody's cup of tea. You know what I'm saying? As a whatever. But the fact that he took a very ridiculously divisive political topic and built a role-playing game setting around it with lots of things that fit into this kind of wacky sci-fi setting, like I am glad that exists. You know what I mean? And my fear is, okay, we go under this new system license, and Games Workshop or Hasbro Wizards of the Coast is in charge of everything, and somebody wants to put out anything that is the least bit controversial. What are the lawyers going to say? Mm-hmm. Right? We're immediately going to have a chilling effect of, hey, I've got a sci-fi setting set after a bonkers of war about abortion. Oh God, I don't want to get in the middle of that. No. Right? Or let's go with Book of Erotic Fantasy, right? That was another published thing that came out, like, and that was a big deal because it was like X-rated or whatever.
I agree with that being taken to task.
Right, don't say we did.
God, yeah, it's funny. We're talking about sex. I'm being serious here. Like, quit fucking around for a minute.
I just wish
I'm serious. If people want to publish something that goes against the same bullshit mainstream stuff that we've all seen for 40 years, God forbid somebody wants to do something new, different, edgy, whatever you want to call it, man, the first people that are going to drop the ban hammer are going to be the corporate lawyers over at Hasbro. And some people think that's amazing and that's great and that's what they should do. And cool, I understand that concept as well. But I've also seen things published that you're like, hey, that's not my cup of tea. But the fact that it's out there is exactly why third-party publishing really should exist. Cool. You want to explore, Roe v. Wade, choice versus life in a ridiculous blown up setting, and with sci-fi tropes. Who else is going to publish that? You think you're ever going to see that from Wizards of the Coast? Nope. Right. And so some people might go, well, that's dumb and we don't want to have that. Well, it's not up to you to decide what's dumb and what we should have. Who's going to decide what can get out there? And yeah, we all like to laugh about the book of erotic fantasy, but okay. Literally Game of Thrones started with incest. Right, one of the most popular
didn't start
pop culture things.
But it was very quickly introduced.
It was very quickly in episode 1. Hello, but again, this is my point. Is some other type of product that deals with mature themes.
Yeah, but none of the stuff that you're saying dissuades me from my idea that to truly have that, because free speech doesn't exist when it's an IP or part of a company, that kind of thing. All the stuff you said just kind of reiterates my point. There should be a community effort for making just a system that everybody can use, that there's no, it's public domain.
I agree with you. And part of the reason for that is I don't want some corporate entity to be able to decide what gets published and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. The market decides if it has some traction. People want sexy D&D books, they're going to buy them. If they don't want sexy D&D books, they're not going to buy them.
Right.
If they want
some
edgy,
hub for them to be able to go through to find these
and as a less extreme example, like a lot of what I published was for the D20 modern system, because I'm less interested in fantasy and I'm more interested in either modern or like science fiction stuff. So I veered toward that aspect of it. But if I wanted to do a modern thing set right today, super cool, all right, am I allowed to use actual terrorist organization? Can I have Al Qaeda as a bad guy in my thing? And oh no, they're radical Muslim terrorists. Well, that's an actual religion that exists today. Are we going to drop the ban hammer on that because it's talking about an existing religion? Oh no, I've got people that want to blow up an abortion clinic, or people that are gangbangers that are trying to join the military and learn skills so they can take it back to their white supremacist gang. Like, all of these things have been in Tom Clancy novels and techno thrillers. Are we going to draw the line? Oh, we can't have role-playing games about any of these controversial topics. And I think nobody has really kind of glommed onto that, is if Wizards of the Coast at their sole discretion can rescind your license. Now they're in charge of every topic that a role-playing game gets to be made about, published under that system. And I think that's a problem. I think it's a potential problem. If you have a light hand and you're like, hey, let people do stuff until it gets way out of hand, then you're like, maybe you shouldn't publish that, or we don't want you to publish that. You're gonna have to publish that under a different license or something. I'm not saying, that we want. Well, I think I've made my point. You know what I'm saying?
That's what White Wolf Games did, though, with Black Dog Game Company. All of their edgy stuff. White Wolf, White Wolf was edgy. Like, White Wolf pushed the limits by modern standards in their old vampire, werewolf,
Masquerade and all that.
Masquerade, all the World of Darkness stuff. But when stuff went even beyond that into the realm of the stuff, Mark, that you're talking about, they made a new publishing company called Black Dog Games. And they made the Book of the Fomari and Clan Book by Ali and all those other things that were just, they weren't everyone's cup of tea. And some of them were really quite, raw. But they didn't associate them with their own line. But they were still made by the same company. Like when you went in all the Indicia,
Yeah, well, Marvel did the same thing with their Max line, where it was all Marvel and we knew it, but they're like, okay, this is some adult stories where we're going to have a little bit more violence, or we're going to have some sex, or we're going to have some non-PG-13 stuff that goes in the main line. And you're right, I could totally see that being a separate imprint or something. But the point I really want to bring up is, if one entity is in charge and they have 30 days to rescind a license, that is de facto going to have a chilling effect on the fringes of, I want to really push the edge of what this content is, whatever that is. You know what I mean? Because let's face it, if I want to publish something about elves and dwarves and orcs all day long, nobody cares about that. But the second I want to publish something that's kind of makes people uncomfortable, who's going to go run into Big Brother Hasbro? Oh my gosh, I'm offended by this thing somebody put out. You should cancel them. We haven't ever seen an example of that happen, have we?
Well, that's the modern weakness. That's the way things are nowadays. People can't take things that push against their sensibilities. If they do, they go to try to complain to Big Brother to get rid of it. No, don't just leave it in the market and let me ignore it. You got to actually excise it from existence.
We now have to fight against this thing.
Ever encounter it. So I don't have to encounter it, even though I don't like it and someone else loves it. If it's there and I don't like it, it has to be cut out of existence so I can't ever come across it or even hear about it because it might hurt my fifis. Yeah, that's ridiculous. And I think that's more where what you're talking about is that there's less of a tolerance for things. People just can't take stuff they don't like anymore.
I will never blame a company for saying no, you can't publish that under my name.
Yeah,
company. Fine. I mean, companies have a brand.
Hold on, nobody is publishing it under their name. Like, nobody is saying, "Hey, I've got this sexy book, and it's got D&D on it." Because under the open game license, it's compatible, but it's not. But you're talking about content. The chilling everybody
effect,
knows that.
But you're talking about the chilling effect of these lawyers from Hasbro coming in and saying, "No, you can't do that."
Right.
Or Hasbro just as a company, and I wouldn't fault Hasbro for that. They have a market base. They have a known customer base that they're trying to cater to, and but this goes back to Sean's point. If people want to publish that type of stuff, go publish it. But don't try to attach it to this other thing. I mean, make it unto yourself.
No, you're saying that 23 years after the fact, where the open gaming license has been out for older than some of the players, and there's never been an issue, and it's open. It literally says, "Hey, this is open and irrevocable," or didn't say irrevocable, but perpetual, royalty free. Like we didn't make them do that 23 years ago. They did it for business reasons. The people that were in charge at the time were like, "This is going to be good for the brand. It's going to build the overall D&D, a rising tide raises all ships kind of thing. So we're going to let these little dinghies over here float along with the mothership." Right? That was the thought process. And so, I reject somebody coming in 23 years later and saying, "Well, now I want to have control over who's publishing what."
Well, that
decision should have been made 23 years ago, and it wasn't. So you don't get that level of control now. They're trying to claw that back, and I don't think they're going to be successful.
You may reject it, Mark, but the landscape has changed, and Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro get to dictate a lot of that landscape. And even if it goes into the courts, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast will most likely come out on top and be able to dictate a lot of what happens.
Under the 3rd edition OGL, right? They can't come to a publisher and go, "Hey, we don't like what you published. You have to take that down." True or false? That's true. There's plenty of content out there that somebody's going to find, and they don't have the power, or they would have used it by now, to say, "We don't like this. You should take that down." Under the original OGL, the new version that they're floating would give them that power.
Yeah,
right? And I understand them wanting it, but to say that they should have done that's coulda, shoulda, woulda. That was 23 years ago, and they haven't done that up until this point, which means they don't have the power.
We've been going for a long time, so I'm going to say this as our last comment before we sign off. You just got a view of what it would be like to see lawyer Mark Cathro in court, where he asks the witness, "Is it true that you murdered that person?" "Yes, it's true."
I'd like to add another great movie
case clip.
I'd like to add another great movie quote on the host's behalf. "I'm altering the terms of this deal. Pray I don't alter it further."
Oh man, I did not see that one coming, and I should have.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure by the next time we broadcast, we'll have a resolution going.
Yep, we'll have it all figured out. So.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.